Let's start our Buddhism 101. Let's put our hands together in front of our hearts and say sadhu 3 times. We have come to the 9th session. Session 8, we had a discussion about the Four Noble Truths, and that was sort of a precursor to what we are going to do today. In fact, all what we are going to do today is going to nicely come into a jigsaw puzzle. They will be connected, and without having enough context, it's almost difficult to understand some of these concepts. Again, not because they are very academically different and all. It's just a way of presentation. Any theory has a way of presenting. So this is not a empirically experientially a very different task, but to know what name that we call that experience, that is the difficult part that we are going through here, not Buddhism itself. So there's a little bit of learning. We need to learn a new system. So we had a chat around the first sutta of Buddha called Dhamma Chakka Pavattana Sutta. Dhamma Chakka Pavattana Sutta. And a further explanation to that Dhamma Chakka Pavattana Sutta coming from Satcha Vibhanga Sutta, coming from one of the most revered and they say he's the most, he knew Buddhism second best to Buddha. So Sariputta, his other disciples, Sariputta and Moggallana. And we looked at the we looked at the reason, dukkha, what is dukkha Mariya Satcham, and then samudaya and nirodha, origin and the cessation, and then the path, the eightfold noble path, what we said we are going to take it later. And then we sort of boiled down the entire summary to this, dukkha, samudaya, nirodha, magga. And then we also had a discussion around the pancha upadanakkhandha, but I said we are going to address it later. So that's what we are going to do today. And how the monk Sariputta has explained what is the beginning, what is aging, and a whole lot. So there's a big explanation of all these things. But we said we are going to again curtail it to this little table. This is the summary of the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, which is further explained in the Satcha Vibhanga Sutta. And still, we were not able to understand what Pancha Upadanakkhandha Dukkha means. We sort of understood what birth, death, and grief, lamentation is, but not the entirety of that. And then we also divided this dukkha just to move away from a pure connotation or an idea of suffering. It's way beyond suffering. So suffering word, it has a big limitation. It's because there's a part of dukkha which is felt, another part which is not felt. So how can the not felt dukkha be suffering? You can't put it as suffering. So there's a physical component that we discussed, and a mental component, and also philosophical component. Can a philosophy be a pain in your mind? It can be, but can it be a pain that you feel? So we have divided it that way. We also said there's a very particular word called dukkha dukkha. Dukkha means again suffering. So this is a tricky thing with the language. Dukkha also means suffering. Then dukkha dukkha is the suffering because of suffering. But then there's another dukkha which is not because of suffering, viparinama dukkha. Right? So it is not necessarily a suffering-based dukkha. So there are more dukkhas. And then we looked at the sankhara dukkha. But I said, before we understand sankhara, we need to understand something else, which is what we are going to do today. I'm sorry if I'm complicating you. I hope you are not getting complicated. The idea is not to get complicated. It's just the Theravada model of Buddhism, which is very logical, very academic. So because of that, some people find it a little difficult to grasp. If you go to Thai forest monasteries, they are very Theravada tradition based, but the Thai senior monks, they would say, don't touch the Pali Canon until you do your meditation practice. So they would completely discourage a new student. I completely get that point. Because one could be very full of this jargon, all the names and words, but it doesn't mean anything to that person. So what is more important is your experience. So the experiential truth, even if you do not know these words, that doesn't stop you from attaining enlightenment. Because this is another language, and you can attain enlightenment in any language, even in SQL and Java and computer languages. So it doesn't matter. Today we are going to discuss a combination of the 3 marks of existence and the 5 aggregates. They are sort of interdependent on each other, and because of that interdependency, we are going to learn about interdependency on a following week. It's called dependent arising or Paticca Samuppada. One of the most, you could say, the heart of the philosophy is Paticca Samuppada, dependent arising or interdependence. So that's why it's pretty interdependent. It's like a jigsaw puzzle where different pieces fit in. So this is what we have been doing. So today let's start this session with this. The other day, this is a session from this slide from the previous day. Dveme bhikkave anta pabbajitena sevitabba kamasukallikanuyogo eko anto attakilamathanayogo dutiyo, which means that Buddha is talking about 2 extremes and a middle path, right? Now often when the other day the monks were walking in the Niagara-on-the-Lake Park, and then there were 2 roads and there was a 3rd road in the middle. So we thought Buddha has instructed us to go on the middle path, so we are going to take the middle path. Is that the middle path discussed here? So it's very important to understand what is middle path. Is it like a physical path, or what is middle path? Because people who have a Buddhist background may sort of have an idea about what that is, but someone who's hearing it for the first time, is it instructing to go on a particular path, not to the right, not to the left, in the middle? Is that what it means? So to understand, the best way would be to understand Buddha's life. So Buddha, before he became Buddha, Prince Siddhartha, he was a prince who was born to a king called Shakya, the Shakya clan. So his father somehow noticed that Buddha could be not so interested about being the heir to the kingdom. He might take a different path. So then the father wanted to stop it. Father was doing everything possible to sort of entice the young prince, so the prince would become an heir. And to that father's nightmare, he one day abandoned the kingdom and he said, I don't have anything to do with this kingdom. I'm going to go on my path. So before it happened, the father was trying to entice the king, the prince, by giving him a lot of materialistic luxuries. So they say that he had a group of concubines, like a huge group of concubines, 4 palaces. So he has been given a lot of luxury. And so he has lived at one point of his life a very hedonistic lifestyle, extremely a hedonistic lifestyle. I'm sure that there was a lot of consumption of different stimulants, and there's physical activities, music, dancing. There was a lot of things. So if at all, if someone could vouch for that part of the life, the hedonistic lifestyle, it will be Prince Siddhartha, because he was very fortunate. He had the father provided everything. By the age of 16, he got married to a very beautiful princess in another kingdom, but then he still had his other concubines. That's how it is back in the day. This is 2,500 years ago. So then he indulged in the extreme hedonistic lifestyle at one point of his life, and then he said, okay, from today onwards I'm going to go away, and then he went to become an ascetic. So this style or this tradition of monks or the pravurja has predated Buddha. So he came and he became one of the ascetics. So he had to cut his hair, not this short, but he had to get rid of his hair, because again, I think back in the day, people had very long hair. The men had very long hair. So it was sort of a status symbol to have long hair. So he cut down his hair, and he would not put flowers and scents, aromas on his hair. So he stopped that practice. He resorted to a very minimalistic practice, and then he became the ascetic Siddhartha. So he was a very keen student. He went to quite a few teachers at the time, and then he managed to learn a lot from these teachers. Alara Kalama, Uddaka Ramaputta, some of the best teachers available at that time, great philosophers. And this time period happened to be one of the greatest times in the world, not only in that part of India. This period is called the Axial Age, where there was a lot of enlightenment discussion. There was a lot of Buddhas at that time. So they say that there was a Buddha fight at the time, a Buddha Kolahala. Everyone was claiming, I'm Buddha. So there was this very beautiful time. But then the good thing is a lot of people were discussing about what has happened there. You know, what's enlightenment, what's emancipation, what is the core of the human existential problem. So there was beautiful discussion. In fact, if you look at pretty much all the world religions to date, they are stemming from that era. Confucianism, Taoism, Judaism, Christianity, Buddhism, Jainism, most of the Vedic interpretations called Upanishads, they're all stemming from that era, although some could be a little older. So axial age is a beautiful time. And then Buddha resorted into this very hardcore practice of being a very extreme ascetic. So he would sit under a place, not even opening his eyes to eat or drink water. So he would not quench his thirst, not be in his hunger, and he'll be meditating. So he was so into meditation to a point where his body shrunk like an old man, like on this other picture. Maybe it's a bit of an exaggeration, but he went through a very hardcore practice. And to date, I find that if you walk around in India, you find some people who are into these very hardcore practices. So I have met one yogi. He would always keep his hand like this for the last so many years. His hand was like this. So to a point, he has a physical injury now. He can't lower it down. His hand is going to break. I've seen another yogi. He has a tree on his hair. Like he's growing a tree. Right? So there are some extreme practices, but then some we might laugh at it, but I completely respect it. I've spent a night in the Ganges with Agori sadhus. Some people are very scared of them, but they're not scary, they're nice people. So the other time when I was in Rishikesh, there's a temple called the Bhutnath temple. Bhutnath means a little bit of dark side of dark, things. So people are extremely scared. So there was a group of ascetics, Agori sadhus. Agori sadhus are known to be hanging around cemeteries. They would have a skull where they would drink water in that human skull, and but they are extremely innocent people. I don't know why people are scared. Their practice is extreme non-violence. They are so innocent, they would not even pluck a fruit from a tree. They're so innocent. And their practice is they would not want to kill anything which is living, including a tree. So they would always eat something which is lying on the ground, including human carcasses, which is dead, right? So because of that, people are very scared of them. But I completely respect their practice, because it's not easy. It's easy for someone to comment that this is stupid, but I respect anyone who's going through a hardcore practice. I completely respect them, because it takes a lot of courage to dedicate your life and your luxuries to do something like that. But then at the end, Buddha said it's kind of stupid. So he said we should refrain from the extreme. That is not what we are looking at. Your true emancipation is not resorting into an extreme or to the extreme of hedonism. But then, very interestingly, karma, I think you heard the word karma before. Sankapparago purisassa kamo, sensual pleasures, right? So this idea of extreme pain or extreme indulgence. Now, before we understand the Majjhima Patipada, which I'm not going to discuss today, we need to understand what that is. So the best way I see it, early this year in around March, I was in Australia, and I saw people playing cricket in Sydney, which was at 45 degrees Celsius, which is scorching hot, very, very hot, no humidity. But they were very happily playing summer cricket, right? And I was just looking at the kids, they were very happy to do that. And then I came to Canada. That was the day before that, or the day that we had this big snowfall, right? The little kids were playing ice hockey over there on the other side of the lake, and they were tobogganing. So they were very happy too, in -20, right? So now one would say, well, plus 45 is a very difficult, physically uncomfortable weather. It's a torture, in fact, to be in that weather. It's a torture to be in -20. But if you look at the kids, they are so happy. They are They're so happy, when they're playing. So this atta kilamatanu kamasukallikaanu is not really in your physical reality. It's not part of our physical reality. It's part of our mental reality. Because you can be in a very extremely good physical surrounding, but you can be very depressed, right? And you can be in an extremely bad physical surrounding, but you can be very happy. I have met this guy in an island of Philippines called the Baganga Islands. He's the most happiest person I have ever seen. He's so happy. Every time I see him, he's extremely happy. But he has a bit of a drinking problem. That's why he's happy. He's kind of old. He's in his 60s or 60 plus. He has a girlfriend who's 20 years old. Maybe that's why he's happy. But then he does not have good living conditions. His living conditions are sort of challenging. But he's so happy. Like, you literally see him that he's all the time you meet him, he's very euphoric. He's very happy. He has his drum that he plays at midnight, so you can't sleep. He's a happy person. But then I find some people in many parts of the world. I have met people who are extremely rich, not just few $1,000 rich, top 10 rich in some of the countries. And I've seen that they are depressed. I know one friend who's extremely rich, and regardless of all that wealth, she's very depressed. So it's not about our physical reality, it's about what is going in your mind. So which brings us to a very interesting idea. This middle path has nothing to do with the physical reality. It's more to do with the mind. And these extremes are not really in the physical realm, they're more mind related. Now, by that, I'm not denying that we are not going to look at the physical truth at all. But it's more mind oriented. The reality is more mind oriented. We are not denying the physical existence, it's more mind oriented. So then the 3 marks of existence are this: anicca, dukkha, anatta. Again, this is, if someone asks what is Buddhism in a nutshell, your go-to answer is 3 marks of existence, or the 3 characteristics: anicca, dukkha, anatta. And the beautiful thing is, all these characteristics are not things that you need to believe in. You don't have to believe in Buddhism. Buddhism is not in the business of believing in. Buddhism is in the business of experiencing. Pacchattam veditabba vinyo hiti, which means you experience, you see, and then you realize. So vipassana is the path to do that experiencing. And we see the anicca, dukkha, anatta. Again, I'm very sorry that I have to put some English words because it's a very nuanced idea. There's a book called Patisambhita Magga Prakarana. In that, there are 40 different definitions to anicca, dukkha, anatta. Right? So it's a very nuanced idea. But to start from somewhere, I'm going to settle down with impermanence, unsatisfactoriness or suffering, and non-self or absence of a permanent self. Now that's a really tricky idea, right? Absence of a permanent self. On the contrary to popular belief between Buddhists and mostly Hindus, the existence of a permanent self, this is a very different idea. But then I always see Buddhism is like a wise adult showing the moon. An ignorant kid could look at the finger. Instead of looking at the moon or the direction, you can just be bound by the sugar coating, the encapsulation, not the core idea. So even this anicca, dukkha, anatta, in a very deeper form, in a profound form, that is not the truth. But don't get too carried away by that. We'll try to understand what it is. Again, not on a theoretical or a believing in basis, but on a experiential and reflection basis. Okay. So the other day we were discussing a little bit of dukkha, impermanence, and the reason for dukkha being craving. And Heidi asked this most beautiful question the other day: how about everything that you have to experience, which are not because of your craving? That's a wonderful question. That's a great question. So in the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, it would say craving or tanha is the cause of suffering. not having or the absence of tanha or the craving is the cessation of suffering, right? So how about you becoming thirsty? Were you craving for water or is it part of your existence? What if someone comes here all of a sudden and does something very physically damaging to all of us? Is it because we craved for something or what is it? So then it brings us to this very important question. Is suffering all due to craving, or is there another element of suffering? Now they say in Buddha's life, Buddha lived up to 80 years. So he got enlightened when he was 35, and then he preached for 45 years, but he was very old. He was a very weak person at the end, like 80-year-old person who has to walk many miles a day. He was very weak, and then he was very tired at points. He was having a lot of physical pain. He had a headache, he had a backache, he had some other pains at the end. When he was dying, he did not even have access to good drinking water. He had to drink muddy water. So then Buddha was definitely under some sort of physical stress, right? So is it because he's not enlightened? So does enlightenment ensures that all your problems are going to be over? So now that's a question that we need to look at, right? But before we understand that, again, we have to come to this word sankhara. I will explain you why. Let's go to the scriptures and what are the scriptural references we find on this. We find in the Pali Canon a whole section called Anicca Vagga, which means the subtopic of anicca. There's a big book and so many suttas, so many discussions under that. In the linked discourses, so SN means Sangyukta Nikaya, or the linked discourses. They are called linked because the compiler of that editor of that book, he has linked all the aniccas together and put it down there. Wonderful book. I actually like the Buddhist book very much. Now, having studied engineering, which is sort of different to humanities studies, art. If you have to comment on a piece of music or an art, it's very different. You can't put it in under a structure. Of course, some exams require to comment under structure. Engineering is very structured. There's a particular way. In fact, the classical Aristotelian philosophy says there cannot be any ambiguity, exclusion of middle path, right? So the Tripitaka Pali Canon, I find it to be a very technically nice book. There's absolutely no ambiguity. It's almost a perfect book. Not perfect because people like to comment on their holy book saying this is a perfect book. I'm not commenting based on that because it's because the logic is very sound, right? But then in that book itself, Buddha says, well, the logics are good, but it's still flawed. So Buddha says something and refutes his own teaching sometimes. But then this particular Anicca Vagga, I'm taking 3 extracts from 3 suttas. It says, Bhikkhus, form is impermanent. Rupam bhikkhave aniccam, vedana anicca, sanya anicca, sankhara anicca, vinyanam aniccam. Right? So we know the word anicca, impermanence, and then suffering, and anatta, non-self. But then it has a few other words: form, perception, volitional formations, consciousness, and form, feeling, perception, volitional formations, and consciousness. 5 things which are impermanent. Now, what are those 5 things? That's the topic that we are going to look at today, the 5 aggregates. So 5 aggregates, we found that before in the previous slide of Satchapibanga Sutta, Pancha Upadana Kanda Dukkha. So this suffering is not that physical suffering which is discussed in the Pali Canon. Of course, there's a discussion about the physical suffering. Dukkha is purely physical suffering. But then the Four Noble Truths, dukkha, is not necessarily that. So we need to understand what is Buddha talking about. It's not a solution for all your problems. It's a solution for a particular set of problems, right? So for example, Buddha would not have medical advice in that. It has a little bit of therapeutic advice, but not a lot. There is a little bit of therapeutic advice, and people have taken extracts from that and made it under therapy, but a little bit, that's not the main focus. It does not have commentaries on the sociology, social order. It has a few indications here and there how a person should treat the family, how a king should run the country, but very small place, very few places. It's not the main idea. The main idea is on dukkha, anicca, dukkha, anatta, paticca samuppada. So then we need to understand what is Buddhism, what can we use Buddhism for, and what is what we can't use Buddhism for, right? So again, I find that I know one famous NASA scientist. He's trying to take the Pali Canon to prove black holes, which I find not a correct way of doing that, because it's not a book for all the problems. It's a book for a few problems. Buddha had clearly defined what is my commentary on. It does not tell you everything. Again, this classic thing appears when a person is revered. There's a lot of reverence. So with that reverence, this is the classic problem the God has in the Bible. People would say the God is omniscient. He knows everything that is noble, right? Which is fair because he's the God Almighty. But then you take the other philosophers like Jaina Mahavira, Buddha. People call, well, Buddha knows everything, right? So when I used to be a little naughty child, I was always asking, so do you think that Buddha would know Windows 98? It was Windows 98 that time, right? So it's almost in the lines of blasphemy, but I thought, well, Buddha can't know everything. But Buddha knows a particular thing. He has mastered that, but he would not know everything. That's a wrong statement, right? But he has known a lot of things. He mastered the works of the mind, the Pancha Upadanaskandha Dukkha, the Four Noble Truths he has mastered. So let's see what Buddha has mastered. So the 5 aggregates in summary are this: Rupa, Vedana, Sanya, Sankhara, Vijnana. So the Pali words, Pali language has a little bit of different sounds that we don't find in English. Do we find the word nya in English? Nya. No, right? It's a little difficult even for people who speaks Pali and even Sinhala language. It's a little difficult, especially when you have to write it. Nya is a very difficult word to write. So one day there was this policeman who was on the road, and someone was speeding. So he stopped the vehicle and then he asked for the name. He said, Anya Kondanyanage Panyadasa, which is a very hard word to write. The policeman said, okay, you can go this time. So Sanya, Vijnana are on those range, but not very difficult. Rupa, Vedana, Sanya, Sankhara, Vijnana. Form, feeling, perception, volitional formations and consciousness. Now, it might not give a good meaning. I will try to explain it. So this is where it gets interesting. Also, there's another word called Khanda or Skanda, aggregates. It literally means a heap of things, a group of things. Skanda. Pancha means 5. Skanda means group of things. 5 aggregates. That's why it's called aggregates. And this is, we need to understand that this is also a model to describe this philosophy. There are many models. Even within the Pali Canon itself, there's more than this model. So this is one of the models. I see at least 6 to 8 different types of models which has been used in the Theravada Pali Canon to explain the same phenomena. This is one model, right? So don't get overwhelmed by all the models that you have to study now. But then I find 2,500 years ago, neuroscience and psychology were not, probably they did not exist, but Buddha was a fantastic psychologist and neuroscientist, if you look at it that way. So let's try to understand the 5 aggregates approach or the model. But before we understand that, we need to understand this, the sense bases, right? Now, what are sense bases? We have our body and the tongue and the nose. So the nose, the function of the nose is to smell. It can smell something. Tongue can taste something. Body can feel something, right? But then the moment that nose has to smell something, there has to be another side of the story. Which means for the body to touch something, there has to be something which is subjected to touch. Do you understand that point? It's a very simple thing, but it's a very profound idea. This is sort of the basis of Paticca Samuppada, dependent arising. If you are in a floating tank, you can't feel your body. If you are in a completely silent room, there's no sound except for Colleen. Except for Joey and Colleen, maybe. Now that we have started different type of meditation, we have a sound built in. I have that too. So if there's no sound, we cannot experience anything. Can you experience the back of your head right now? Touch it and see. So there has to be something subjected to touch and a body which can process that feeling of touch. So it's a combination of two things, not just a single-handed thing. So we find 3 here and 3 on the other side. So we could even call internal and external. 3 internal organs and then 3 external organs. But let's go and see what is external and what is internal. And then we have 2 other very important things. They are put in a particular order, but I will not discuss about the order. Eye and the ear. And I'm putting all the Pali words here. Chakku, Sota, Gana, Jivha, Kaya. And then image, sound, odor, taste and touch. But you might notice something here. The word Rupa appears here. I don't know if you noticed from the earlier slide, I called the form also Rupa. And image is also Rupa. So now it becomes a little tricky because of that. But then again, wherever it has to be defined, it's defined properly. But if you do not know that definition, you can get a little misleading. It can be a little misleading. But then we have the 5 senses. Is that all there is? But if you ask a modern scientist, they would say the sense of balance is also a sensation, right? There's, according to biology, like medicine, there's about 18 different senses people have. It's really amazing the sort of senses the beings have. I have a prediction for this summer. I predict this summer is going to be a little wet. You know why? This is just a theory. There's a muskrat lodge right outside. It's very close to the edge of the bank of the lake. It's very close to the bank. So they love water. So my prediction is that if that's close to the bank, the lake is going to be full most of the time. And I don't know if you remember 3-4 years ago, there was this big drought. The lake almost dried up. And in spring, the beaver has started cutting down so many trees. And he knew that the summer is going to be dry. So I'm just trying to come up with a theory, observe the animals and see if we can forecast climate. But are there only 5 elements? We have the most important one, mind, right? So mind is needed to experience all these. But then there's another side to that. There are other things which are not necessarily images, sounds, odors, tastes and touch which the mind can perceive. Is that correct? Can you give me an example for something which is not image, not hearing in your mind? Yes? Intuition. What else?
Like more ethereal concepts like justice.
Right. Abstract concepts. Yeah. What else? Philosophy. What else? Feelings. Euphoria, you can't show it through an image, sound, etc., etc. But you can tell, well, this image caused me to be happy, or this image caused me to be sad. But then there's a whole lot of other mental objects which are not necessarily stemming from eye, ear, nose, tongue and body. But again, when you look at most of your thoughts, they have some sort of a basis on those things. They stem from those things, right? Pretty much most of the things, except for some mental objects in meditation. They are not sort of caused by the bodily, the physical eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, or image, sound, odor, taste, touch. But the most of them are stemming from these things. So these are the sense bases, and it's important to understand sense bases before we go further. The sense bases are always very limited in nature. There's a big limitation in sense spaces. That's why Buddhism acknowledges sense spaces but does not take it very seriously again because it's very limited by nature. The best way to understand it is through this idea called prasada rupa. Oh, I don't have an English word for that, so I put mirroring there. So this is what it means. If you look at a submarine with a periscope, it could put the periscope up and it could look around, and then let's say it notices another ship on the water. So the submarine is a few hundred meters down the water, it's submerged. Now when some person looks through the periscope, he sees a ship. It's not the real ship. What does that mean? It is the real ship. But what if I say it's a reflection of that ship? It is not the actual ship. Is that correct? Because the light from the ship goes onto the eyepiece of the, not the eyepiece, the other end of the periscope, and then it goes through a set of prisms, maybe cameras in the modern day, and then it's recreated on the eyepiece. So we are looking at that recreation, right? So can you look at your hands right now? Right, look at your hands. What if we look at your hands through a phone? Is that the real image or a reflection of that? Based on your phone filter, modern days you have all sorts of filters, your hand could look very pretty or ugly, right? So that's a version of the truth. It's not the truth. Have you seen your face? You have never seen your true face, literally, because we have always seen a reflection of our face. We have seen the back of our hand, the palms, the fingers, but we have never seen our face. Our face has always been a reflection of the mirror, right? So, this concept is very interesting and very important. Even right now, what we see, that is still not the real image. Why? Because light from the hand is bouncing to my retina. My retina has rod cells, cone cells. It's converting them to an electrical signal. The light photons are now converted to an electrical signal. Electrical signal goes to my visual cortex and it is interpreted as an image in my mind. So right now I'm looking at that image, not this hand, right? So that's why the sense bases are not taken very seriously. They seems like they are a very big part of our reality, but you can't take them very seriously because they are very limiting. If your nerve is broken here, or if it's somehow defected, you might see a completely different picture. If your equipment here, the retina is defected, you will see a different reality. Some people are colorblind, and there's so many things which could go wrong where you will get a different version of the reality, not the exact reality. So can we get to the real reality? Now that's the question. And then the other question is, this is to demonstrate, I know someone who does a lot of cochlear implants. So cochlear implants is a perfect example. The cochlear nerve gets degenerated. Cochlear nerve is the nerve which takes sound signal to the brain. So they have cochlear implants. They put a brain stem implant with a little wire. Now a microphone is picking up that sound and feeding it to your brain stem. So imagine a kid, when that kid is very young, infant, you put a stem and then you put instead of putting a microphone, you put some device so that he will experience something like a virtual reality thing. So wherever he goes, he listens to music. So he might think that is reality, right? In fact, if you have watched the movie Matrix, it is stemming from an idea from René Descartes called the brain in the vat experiment. But then it has it goes even beyond that. Before René Descartes found it out, this discussion was a lot in Vedic studies in Buddhism. Is your sense-based reality a truth, or can we somehow mimic it and show you a complete different reality? But will your problems will be solved even if it's not a reality? So it's a whole different discussion. And then I mentioned that this time everyone was talking about it. The next, one of my favorite person who has discussed about it is Plato. On the West, he's a few hundred years later Buddha on the other side of the world, And he has been discussing about the same idea. I like Plato because Plato has a completely word called forms. Forms. He goes into very detail about forms. So if you want to learn a little more about forms other than in Buddhism, it's in Plato's book. I can't remember the book, but it discusses about 18 different types of forms. Right? In Buddhism, there's 27 types of forms. So very similar idea. So the Plato's allegory of curve, have you heard about this allegory? It's a very simple idea. So this is a thought experiment. He proposed, what if a person is put into a cave? Here, this prisoner is in a cave. He's prisoned. He is shackled. He can only see the not the opening of the cave, but the wall of the cave. So he can always look at that side. And then there's another man at the wall, the entrance of the cave. He would show different images, and this prisoner who's shackled, who can't look back, he would always see the shadows of these images. So he would not see the actual images, but he will see the shadows of these images. So based on these shadows, he will think, well, that is the reality. So it goes further. One day, out of those prisoners, one prisoner goes, he manages to release himself. So he goes out, he sees the actual bird. And then he comes inside and says, well, this bird is only a shadow of the bird. This is not the real bird, but the others don't believe him. So that's Plato's allegory of allegory of the cave. It's an allegory to explain we have forms in our mind, not necessarily images. I'm not talking about the image, a version of that image. But like I always say, you see a monk here, you see a flower here, you see a statue of Buddha, you see a television here. Is that the reality? Right? Or is it a abstract concept of that what we see that you interpret as reality? The classic example is this flower. For someone who knows a lot about these flowers, that person would have something completely different. Someone who's very oblivious to the fact that it's even an orchid, he would have a different reality. The same way, someone who has never seen a monk before would not see me as a monk. But now you cannot not see me as a monk. Right? So this idea is again very important. So then in Buddhism, in Theravada form, there's a discussion about rupa or forms. And all these forms or the rupa are stemming from four main rupas, apo, tejo, vayo, patavi. Now we have this inclination, whatever we hear, we want to see it in the real life, or what we call the real life. So we want to equate it to a phenomena in the real life. But then in philosophy, you can't do that. Some of these things are very abstract. So I will tell you the difference. When Apo, Tejo, Vayo, Patavi was translated into many languages, it would go as water. But this is not the idea of water. It's a different conceptual idea of something else. Apo means the affinity. Apo means how tight, how close they are, which has significance to liquids, right? The viscosity of liquids. Honey is more viscous than water, so it's more closely attached. So how do we understand that? The best way to understand that is taking a little embryo, so a little baby. So the baby in his mother's womb, he's in this perfect amniotic fluid. He's floating on the fluid, so he does not feel the sense of weight because he's floating. And he does not have a temperature difference because outside temperature and inside temperature are the same. So it's the same. So he does not have that inside-outside reference. But then the first day that he's been born, he is now delivered. He is now put on a table, on a bed outside. All of a sudden, there's a temperature difference, right? His body and the outside temperature, which is room temperature, are not the same. So for the first time, he feels cold and warmth, right? And then this cold and warmth can be a physical phenomena, of course, but then the interpretation of cold and warmth in your mind. How about that? Does cold mean the same idea? We are not talking about the physical cold and the warmth, the Celsius or the Fahrenheit, what it means to you. How do we interpret the cold? So the idea of heat and cold, in here, we are not talking about a physical phenomena. We are talking about what it means to you. What is the difference of temperature mean to you, heat and cold? So a baby now has a first conceptual idea, a form of what is warmth and what is cold. Right? Again, I'm stressing upon, we are not talking about the physical phenomena of heat and cold. How many Kelvins, Fahrenheit or Celsius? What does that mean to you? I have a friend who's First Nations. He would very easily walk with a t-shirt and shorts in winter, right? He is used to it. So if you take a person from a tropical country, for him, in my country, minus 15, plus 15 is very cold. It's very cold there. There's a town called Nuarelia, which is a very cold city. But 15 here is actually warm sometimes, right? When I went from winter to London, London was plus 5. I started sweating going from the winter in minus 20. So warm and cold is not a physical phenomena. It's how you feel that idea, but more in a conceptual manner. So rupa, fire, tejo. But then what is patavi, earth? People put that, it's interpreted as earth, but patavi is a sensation of hardness, right? So this young child who's born now, he all of a sudden feels that there's something really hard pressing against my back. I did not experience this before. What does that mean? What is that conceptual idea he has about hardness? Patavi. And Patavi means also rocks and earth. That's why people equated it to earth. But it does not necessarily mean earth. Patavi is the conceptual idea of hardness. Again, which is very different from person to person. Some people are very happy to walk on the pea stones outside around the Buddha statue. Some people find it very hard to walk around it. Right? Now, me being a monk and my personal preference to walk barefoot, I find it very enjoyable. I love it. Right? But some people, I see that they feel very uncomfortable, like walking on fire when they walk on the pea stones outside there. So the concept of hardness, it depends on the person. It depends on how you look at it, how you have been conditioned to that. Right? So that's one rudimentary form a person would develop in his beginning of his life. And then there's the idea of vayu. Now vayu again is literally equated to air, but it does not mean air. It means the expansion and the contraction, right? When you take a deep breath in and exhale, it doesn't have to be air necessarily. Forget air. There's an idea of expansion and contraction, like a balloon. And you don't even have to necessarily physically feel it in your body. But if you look at a balloon which is getting inflated and deflated, there's still expansion and deflation. Inflation, deflation, right? So this is all about the conceptual idea of it, not the actual phenomena. It doesn't matter even if it happens in your dream. In your dream, you are breathing in, you are breathing out, you are doing the meditation. That is expansion and deflation. And then water, or apo. Apo means how much they are attracted to each other, right? So two people can have a great affinity. They have more apo. Some people are loosely attached. They have less apo. So these are qualities or the mental interpretation of that quality. Now, I'm keeping this subject here. Now, when I try to lift it, it has a weight. But what is weight? It has a affinity to the earth. They have a connection. They don't want to get away from each other. So I'm trying to remove it, but this doesn't want to come off right away. If it's a big rock, he does not want to come out at all. So that affinity, right? Like Velcro, they are closely related. So they don't want to get out of their affinities. So we are talking about that quality of apo here. So all these things are not physical phenomena. It's actually very misleading when you put earth, water, fire and all that. It's a very misleading idea, right? This is not the physical water or earth or fire, especially if you watch movies like Last Airbender and all that. You get completely derailed with this idea. We think we are talking about physical nature of things. This has nothing to do with that. It's the mental perception or the conceptual idea of what it is. So rupa or forms is not a physical phenomena. It's a mental phenomena, rupa. And then this slide, you have seen this before. Remember? Yeah, Colin?
Just back to the previous slide, I had one question. In the physical form way, for example, fire and water do not get along.
Right.
Does that happen in the manner in which you're explaining it, where they combat each
Completely.
other, they don't get along? as well?
Completely. Like for example, anger and euphoria, the peace, are two different opposites. They won't occur together. You can't be angry at the same time very peaceful. Right? So this same interpretation is there in the mind, but then I'm sort of derailing of the main topic, but there's this wonderful thing where Buddha shows that he can be in both at the same time, which is called Yamaka Patika Jnana. Yamaka Patika Jnana, which means Buddha can be in water and fire at the same time. So later on, when it got interpreted, people thought Buddha displayed some magic. He emitted water and fire from his body, but it has nothing to do with that. If you read the proper scripture, it says Yamaka Patika Jnana, the knowledge of two different things which are of completely contrasting nature. So great question, Colin. Normal person would not be able to experience the two extremes at the same time. You could only experience one extreme. I'm either in fire, I'm burning, I'm angry, I'm ferocious, or I'm very peaceful, or I'm very euphoric. You can't experience the two. And remember this other disciple of Buddha, there was two, Sariputta and Moggallana, the blue color monk. He was said to be the best practitioner of these type of meditative places. He could quickly switch between the two extremes. So switching is basically, if you go this way, you can notice that we are switching, but if you go so fast, you can see that you are switching. So he's known to be very fast in his mind. He could switch to these two extremes. So slightly off the topic, but very interesting ideas around here. So if we go to this slide, Vedana, you have seen this. I described it here. I know I described it because I copied the previous slide. So dukkha, the negative form of Vedana or feeling, and the sukha, the more positive. And then there's a place which is neither, dukkama sukha, neither dukkha or sukha. So what does that mean? When you look at an image, is it dukkha, sukha or adukkama sukha? When you see an image, what is it? Compared to your eye, if you have to comment on your eye, will the eye feel good, negative, positive, or neither? Neither. It's a very interesting, important thing to understand. It's like that camera who's looking at us right now. Camera doesn't comment on us. He's just camera. He's just doing the recording, right? It is not defining it as good or bad. It's just another sensation, right? So I'm not going into that detail here, but the eye, ear, nose, touch, eye, ear, nose, smell, sound, they do not have a good or bad. Is that right? Eye, ear, nose, tongue, they don't have a good or bad. But the body has a good or bad. Body has a negative and a positive. Yes, sort of getting close to Heidi's answer now, question now. The body has a good and a bad based on its life form. If you are an Inuit, if you are an Eskimo who's always lived in the North Pole, your body is different to someone who has lived in the African savannas. You have different small variations. But if you are a different animal, if you are a cow, if you are a goat, if you are a dog, you have a completely different reality of body, right? So I see in -20, -30, the squirrels and the geese, they're okay. They come out, the beaver is hanging around. They can withstand that temperature, but the humans can't. Without clothes, they can't. But the beavers, they are very designed to be normal in that temperature. So the body has a physical negativity and a physical positivity, or an ideal state. 25 Celsius room temperature is a good state to be. Maybe for Canadians, 20 degrees, not 25. in Asia, it's 25, right? So the body has dukkha and sukha. The mind has dukkha and sukha, but the eye, ear, nose, tongue, they do not have that. The mind has sukha and dukkha, correct? You can feel happy, you can feel sad. So that's the idea here. So the Vedana is the felt quality of an experience, not the actual quality, the felt quality of an experience. So I'm harping on the same idea again. We are always talking about the felt quality of that experience, not what is outside there. We are not discussing that here. We are discussing about the experiential reality, not the, let's call it the other one, the real reality, if there is. We are talking always about the experiential reality in your mind. So sukha, dukkha, upeksha. So this is what we discussed at Vedana. And then sanya, perception. Another way to discuss about perception is distinction, contrast. I don't know if you noticed during meditation, I say, let's observe the contrast. When you say you're observing something, what do we really observe? Imagine a thought experiment. You wake up, everything is completely white in your eye, right? Everything you see is completely white. So in that white, would you have a sense of space? How far the things are? We don't know. Everything is white. Now in this big white color, we see a black dot. Okay, now I have a reference point. I am here, that dot is there. But again, we don't know how far that dot is. Maybe it's 1 kilometer, maybe it's million kilometers away. We don't know. We see another second dot. Now we have a better sense of space. Dot and another dot. So we have an idea about space, but very importantly, with the idea of space, the idea of time comes in. Now there's a small object which is moving from one dot to the other dot. Now we have a sense of time, but again we won't be able to tell whether it's years, seconds, or whatever. So it's a very relative understanding, relative perception, but whatever it is, we notice distinction. This is yellow, which is in contrast to white. So we look at the contrast. Our noticing, perception is really the distinction. Okay, so that's why when you are seated at one place, when you have to smell that wonderful turkey poop which comes out every few months, few days, you get desensitized to that because you do not feel the distinction anymore, right? You are by the road. If you have to meditate for a one day, you will stop noticing the birds and the vehicles on the road. You get desensitized. You don't notice the contrast anymore. If you stay long enough doing the meditation, observing your breath, you will stop feeling your breath. Yes, you can very easily get desensitized to that, right? You don't feel your breathing anymore. The first time I saw this, I thought, am I dead? Like, why am I not breathing? Because you don't feel it. You don't see that contrast. So the eye can notice the colors. That's the contrast. The ear can notice loudness, pitch. I copied these slides from a slide I did for some kids, because these things are good to talk about, but really we need to experientially understand this. Right? That's what we usually do during silent retreats. We are trying to understand the sense basis. What is our reality? Before we talk about a liberation, we need to understand where are we right now, right? So sound has different qualities that we can feel. Nose can feel different things. So next time, do this experiment. do this empirically, smell it, taste it, and see what is the distinction. Not to put it into good or bad categories, but just to see the distinction. And the taste has bitter, sour, salty, etc. And the body has the pinching. You can feel the the warmth, cold, the pressure, the pain, and the sensation of touch. So this is sanya. So we covered rupa, forms, vedana, the felt nature of the sensation, sanya, the distinction or the perception again, and then this one called the sankhara. Now sankhara is a very important idea that we need to understand. So sankhara, I always explain sankhara as a production of a movie. Production of a movie. If you observe how the movies are shot, right? Recently I had to do some work with a director who's going to put something for the Toronto Film Festival, a movie. It's a Buddhist movie, so I had to do the subtitles in English. And then he came here the other day and he was explaining about how he shot it in different places. So it's a monastery, which is a cave monastery, and how it's somewhere here and the other shots are somewhere there. So if you look at the production of a movie, they are not this seamless story that we see on the film. They are shot in different places at very different times, right? One shot, and they are not even in a sequence. Some shots are, done before the other shots. So you do certain shots in Canada, and then you go to Florida to do the other shots, right? So they are not in this perfect sequential order that we see in the movie, but then they are different things put together and then combined. So this process of sankhara is exactly the same. That's why if I ask the question, between this flower and the Buddha, which has more patavi? Which has more patavi? What is patavi? The hardness. Between the flower and Buddha, which has more patavi? What do you think? The flower is softer, Buddha is harder. That's the normal idea. But for us to give that answer, we need to do this movie producer's job. We have touched flowers somewhere else. We have touched statues somewhere else. Now we are combining that idea. We are combining that idea and we are telling a version of a reality. Okay, this is harder, this is softer, right? It could be very easily the other way around. The flowers are made out of concrete and the Buddha is made out of sponge. But forget that. Our movie director says, no, the previous flower I touched was softer. Previous statue I touched was harder, so this has to be like that. So this process of sankhara is very deceptive. So that's why these panchaskandha are also not taken very seriously in Buddhism, right? Because they all have their own flaws. So we don't have to necessarily respond to that reality with all these heavy emotions, right? So this is a way to tell you that you don't have to take this reality very seriously. It's not to disregard and say, well, this is an illusion, this is not real. It's not that idea. It's a version of the reality that is interpreted based on your director. So your director is like the conditioning that you have. That director is shaped during your childhood, during your upbringing. It could be because of your genetic makeup, whatever it is. Again, Buddha is not commenting what makes your director your director. We don't want that. But we have a director who's making a film, and that film is based on the director's preference. So that's why some people see a beautiful setup, some people see a very ugly setup based on the director, right? And this director is so good. He has VFX, all this animation and effects. Like, Avatar movie, they're real people, but they are made into a completely different form in the movie. James Cameron is Canadian, right?
Yes.
Who made this, yeah? So amazing movie. And if you look at the making of the movie, you see how the director changes the reality too, and he gives this very valid emotions. Okay, let's take a horror movie. So there's this very dark space and there's a creaking sound of the door, and now the screaming devil is about to come out. But then if you look at it at the set, there are so many people around it, and the sound effect is added later on, it won't look scary at all, right? So all the romantic movies which has a lot of emotions, all the scary movies, the action movies, they are absent of that emotion at the production. Is that correct? Most of them. The other day, the director was saying one of the actors in that movie, he was so passionate, he was hitting someone for real. That could be there. But if you go to the production of the movie, they are void of all these heavy emotional ideas. So we can almost call it's empty, it's absent, shunya, void, right? So that's another important idea. And then we have the final one of the Panchaskandha, Vijnana. Now all these volitional conditioning, the pattern is there, you sense it, there's different abstract concepts, but there should be a process to experience it, Vijnana. So consciousness, awareness, or that observation and observatory part of the mind is called the Vijnana. Right? It's a simple idea, but Vijnana is not the one who's coming up with abstract ideas. Vijnana is not the one who's, it's different to what you feel. It's different to distinction. That is the one who's experiencing the distinction. Right? Now, we have 5 ideas. Rupa, Vedana, Sanya, Sankara, Vijnana. 5 of them. They are like this jigsaw. They won't be in existence on their own. For this to be completed, everything has to be there. But if you remove them one by one, you really can't call that there is something there. Like, there's a table here right now. If you take out different parts of the table, you take out the leg, you take out this plank of wood. When you take things out, is there a table now? And if you lay it on the ground like before you assemble an IKEA table, this is IKEA I think, do you have a table before it is assembled? Right? When it's disassembled, when it's broken down into pieces, you don't find the table. When it's put together, we say there is a table, but in reality, we think there is a table, which is an assembled condition of a few elements. Okay, so we are sort of getting to the core of Buddhism now, the conditional reality. Things are conditionally true. If you take out the conditions, you really can't call it a truth. It's a conditional truth. Correct? Go to the point where you were very scared. You had to get a test done. You were very scared. I met someone like that yesterday. Maybe I might die because of that, because I was asked to do a cancer diagnosis, right? It's is it malignant or not? Very scared. And then during that, I distracted that person a little, and then the conditions were different. And then I asked the question, were you scared? Were you feeling that suspense a few minutes ago? They said, no, I am not. So when the conditions are there, you find a reality. When the conditions are not there, you find a different reality. Right? So the same way, when we put all these 5 things together, it can give you a sense of reality and an experiencer of that reality. I or me or the ego. So you are a combination of these 5 items. But then again, this 5 is only a model to explain. Buddha has explained it in 4, has explained it in 2. So right now, it's a nice way to sort of dissect and show it. All right. So in this 5, sensation, feeling, distinction, sense perception, consciousness, knowing or observing, form, conceptual sketch, and mental patterns, volitional or consequential. What does that mean? Formations or sankhara, which is one of the most important ideas. Now, can you think about things? You have a free will. Not very philosophically, can you think about ice cream right now? Yeah? You can think of the Barry's Lake right now. So you have some sort of a volitional thought which is under your control. Now let's put this to test, right? Can you look at the orchid flower now? Look at the orchid flower. Look at it properly. Look at the shape. Look at the distinction, right? Look at the distinction. Now close your eyes. Close your eyes. Now think about the orchid flower. Orchid. What does that mean to you? And try to recreate that image that you saw with the same distinctions, the color patterns, contrast, the same that you saw there. If you want to refresh your feed, quickly open your eyes, take a good look and then close your eyes. Okay, open your eyes. Now, did you notice what he said, that sometimes the ideas just get loaded into your mind. You can be attentive, but sometimes you can just try to recreate what you saw and hang on to that, but you can't completely hang on to that. It's going to change. Something is going to pop up, but for a little tiny time you might be able to recreate that. Did you notice that? Can you recreate it in your mind? Flower, close your eyes. I'm now recreating that image in my mind. Sound. Recreate that in your mind. Yeah. Open your eyes. So let's do this practically. Let's do this test. So meditation and vipassana is to put this into practice. So now we know a theoretical understanding of what it could be, but it is mental volitions, or is it all consequential? So consequential means the fancy way of saying that ideas pop up in your mind. Consequential, right? Why it is consequential? Because sometimes ideas are completely random. Sometimes they are a trigger to something. So that's why it's sort of consequential. But they are, again, it's very limiting. Some of these ideas might be pure doing. Some of them might be completely pop-ups. Some of them might be a combination of that. Some of them we cannot explain how it came. Right? It's not even a pop-up. It's not a trigger. There are more ways. So there are multiple ways. So now you see that there's a lot of research that we can do with our mind without going anywhere. Just close your eyes and there's a lot of research that you can do. This is observation, not thinking about your mind. Right? This is not trying to think about how the mind behaves. This is trying to observe how your mind behaves. But I'll conclude this here. The Panchakanda or the heap, if you segregate it into 5 heaps, you won't find a real person there. But you find 5 heaps put together which looks like a person. So now I'm going to further explain that idea in the next time, next week, anicca, dukkha, anatta. Right? What is the concept behind that? But then there's another word called pancha upadanakkhandha and panchaskandha. Again, I'm not again answering Heidi's question in full today. If you have ideas in your mind or thoughts in your mind just popped up, you have not done anything, it just popped up in your mind. And that's not part of your craving, right? But then you can be very sad or angry about it, right? How do we find this distinction? Is everything craving based, or are there certain things which has nothing to do with it? The easiest way to explain this is depression, panic attack. For panic attacks, sometimes there's a trigger, sometimes there's no trigger. It's just there. For depression, when you're bipolar, there's no reason for that. Your mind is just in that bad spot. There's no reason for that. Well, there you could link it to physical reasons or whatever, but sometimes you can't find a reason. It's just a feeling in your mind. So some of them can be just sankhara, and some of them can be something called abhisankhara. So sankhara and abhisankhara, panchaskandha and pancha upadanaskandha, there's a slight difference between that. Again, don't get too confused. I will explain it during the next week. So khandha and pancha upadanaskandha has two things. So now we go back to this. Now we are in a better context to understand what it means. Bhikkhus, monks, the form is impermanent. Correct? Is form impermanent? Imagine the concept of man and woman you had when you were younger. When you were age 5, you had a concept of man and woman. The mother and father. Father looks a little bigger and a little rougher. Mother is a little softer. She's kinder. The classical male-female difference. But then you grew up, puberty. Now you start looking at women or men based on your orientation in a different manner, right? Now your concept of man and woman got updated. Your gender idea got updated. So when you grow older, as you grow older with your experience, what you think, the concepts change. When you were born, Patavi just meant your bed, Patavi. But then you found there's feathers, there's water, there's so many other things that you can touch, and there are different things. So the concept of Patavi got updated, and it's very impermanent. Right now, it's continuously in the process of changing. You might have thought of me that the monk Ananda is this way when you entered here. After 1 hour, it's probably changed. Now you think of me in a different manner maybe. So it continuously, form gets changed. The feeling or the sensation, Vedana, it changes all the time. Sometimes you're happy, sometimes you're sad, sometimes you're neither. And your perception, we are looking at green, we are looking at white, yellow, orange, red, changes. And then the volitional formations, the conditioning in your mind, right? Is it always there? Can you be reconfigured? So this reconfiguration of people is called cognitive behavioral therapy. And your conditioning is called education. It's like if we are giving a treat to a dog and praising him. We do the same thing with our kids. If you did a good thing, you get a gold star. You did a bad thing, you get a black star. We condition them through punishment and reward. Right? You came to the temple, you're a good boy. You did not come to the temple, you're a bad boy. You don't get candy today. Right? So that's our conditioning. And then we need to look at how the suffering is impermanent, if suffering is impermanent or not, right? So we need to look at that nature, how anicca, dukkha and anatta are linked using the 5 aggregate model. So one day, anicca, dukkha and anatta went to a place, right? Dukkha said, this place is so bleak, it's so dark, it's suffering. Anicca said, well, don't worry, it's impermanent. Anatta said, who's talking? Right? So we'll get into the further of that. And there's another sutta called Yadanicca Sutta, which I'm going to explain next time. It will be too much for us to grasp. So next week we will continue the discussion on Anicca, Dukkha, Anatta.